As more and more teachers start to share the skill of sketchnoting with their students, the natural question that comes up is, should I grade their work? Should I grade their sketch notes? And if so, how? That's the question that we're going to be exploring today. Let's get into it. Let's start with that first question. Why might you want to grade your students' sketch notes in the first place? I think that there are a couple of good reasons why it's worth considering doing some sort of grading of your students' sketch notes. And one reason has to do with your students' current note-taking style, how they take notes right now. And the second reason actually has to do with unexplored note-taking techniques, things that they haven't even been exposed to yet. When looking at their current note-taking style, I think that you as the instructor could point out opportunities for improvement. So maybe building on what the student's already doing and maybe just doing it a little bit better. But I think particularly within the world of visual note-taking, the benefit of grading your students' sketch notes in a very transparent way is that it can encourage your students to explore different types of techniques, things that they wouldn't otherwise have tried. And when they do that exploration, they might discover certain elements that they actually find to be really helpful and that they can continue using in the future. So with those as a few of the reasons you might consider evaluating your student sketch notes in some way, let's next dig into what that might look like and address the question, what makes for good sketch notes? And here I want to start with an idea that Rachel Smith brought into her TEDx talk about drawing in school and addressing this specific question about visual note-taking, am I doing it right? I really appreciated how she responded to that question in this very simple way. Can you look at your notes and tell back the story? If you can, then you're doing sketchnoting right. If you haven't already seen Rachel's TEDx talk, I highly recommend it. I will link to it down below. And even though I like the simplicity of answering that question with a simple yes or no, and having that be the determining factor of doing visual note-taking right, I think there is a slightly more nuanced way you might ask that question by saying, how well can you tell the story? And here it becomes more of a spectrum from not being able to tell the story at all to being able to tell it fully, and based on the notes that you took, you're somewhere in the middle. And with this particular approach, you might be able to home in on a note-taking process that keeps moving you further to the right, finding those elements that help you tell the story more fully. I wanted to bring in that idea first because I think when it comes to grading, it's probably easy to get lost in the weeds of points and grades and credit, but I think it's important to remember that it really is just about that primary question. Can your students look at their notes and tell the story that they represent? If so, they did it right. So keep that in mind as we now dig a little bit into those weeds, because there are some gems in there as well. So let's now get a little bit more specific and ask the question, how might you go about grading your student sketch notes? I'll be sharing a few options that you might consider, starting with a simple rubric. For a specific sketchnoting session, you might identify 4 or 5 things that you want students to focus on while taking those notes, and to help students focus on them, you can assign them point values, so long as it's clear what you'll be scoring them on. The benefit of this approach is that 1, it ensures that students get experience with specific sketchnoting elements, with the hope that they find out that some of those elements are really helpful to them. And then also, based on the scores that they get in each of those categories, it can help each student know what to pay more attention to next time. So the things that didn't go so well, they can put a little bit more emphasis on the next sketchnoting session. So that's primarily a quantitative way of grading sketch notes. Let's next look at an approach that's much more qualitative. In this case, the feedback might look something like this. You as the instructor simply provide 2 types of feedback. Identify the things that the student did well, and also identify things that students might try differently next time. In that way, you would be reinforcing the good things that you see in that student's notes, and you would also be pointing out opportunities for growth. And it might even be helpful that those pieces of feedback aren't attached to a particular point or grading grading system. You might even find a nice blend of grading that has some qualitative pieces to it and also some more quantitative pieces. So of course, feel free to merge and adapt these systems to work well for you. And no matter what type of grading system you choose, you might consider having students assess their own work. Help them get in the habit of looking at some piece of work that they've created, evaluating and assessing that work, and looking for opportunities to improve next time. That could be a great way to get this internal feedback loop going. And even self-assessment more generally is a skill that students can take with them as they move forward in their education and into their profession. One other suggestion that I want to bring in here doesn't have to do so much with grading, but does have to do with feedback and sharing. You might consider having students share their sketch notes, maybe with the whole class, maybe in a small group, because not only will that give the students the opportunity to tell the story behind those sketch notes, it also gives everyone else the chance to see what someone else's sketch notes look like. And more likely than not, some light bulbs will go off for some of those students because they'll see some things in those notes that they might like to try. And here you'd be tapping into that power of students learning from each other and not just learning from the instructor. So with those as some general ideas about how you might approach grading student sketch notes, let's look at some specific real examples. I want to give a shout out to Miss Freeman's 9th graders at Marsing High School in Idaho. We've been chatting over email and it's been fun to see her students' work as well as how she has gone about grading that work, which is what I'd like to share with you now. Here is the rubric that Miss Freeman used. This is for a culminating project, taking notes on the first part of a story they were reading. And with this rubric, it's very clear to see what the expectations were. Some related more to the content of what was contained within the notes, addressing things like setting and characters and conflicts. But then I also appreciate the specificity of including 2 quotes that show what it was like for the girls, the characters in this story, and also 3 images or 1 scene, and even a summary statement. And as Miss Freeman shared in an email, she mentioned how she was judging based more on content than anything else. She was especially looking for accurate information about the stories. She didn't judge artistry, just neatness and readability. And she told her students that she wanted to see clear evidence of the sketchnoting skills that we had worked on, especially using different fonts and containers to show organization and thought. Otherwise, I gave them free rein to be creative and put their own spin on things. I like that approach, and her students definitely did that. So let's take a look at some examples. Miss Freeman shared 8 different student sketch notes with me, and as we take a look at them, I'm just going to point out the things that stand out to me, things that I would put in that nicely done category that I mentioned earlier. With this first one, I like the big bubble letters that help to identify the different sections of the notes, and how those different sections were clearly grouped on the page with very clear handwriting. I'm also impressed by the drawing of the broken light bulb, which I imagine played a key role in this story because you'll be seeing that many times here. In the second example, I love the single detailed scene in the center of the page, and then the nicely organized text around it, clearly separated into those boxes. And if you look closely, you will again see some broken light bulbs, and I kind of like the contrast here between the first example because I think both work. Both the close-up detailed sketch from that first example and the smaller multiple broken bulbs in the context of a full scene like this. In this third example, we're getting to something that feels a little bit more like a mind map. I like the thicker marker for the title and the blue to separate the sections, and also how within each of those sections, the student included things like bullet points and arrows and some simple images here and there. And again, super clear, legible writing. And here with this one, I also like the contrast in marker size, one for the title and those separating lines, a different utensil for all the detailed text. And as a recurring theme here, I appreciate the clear organization of these thoughts and different ideas. And I imagine that came through in all of these examples because it was something that was emphasized by Miss Freeman. I imagine both in the spoken instruction, but also in that rubric. Also, nice job again on that broken bulb drawn in a more 3D way. This one here has got some flair to it, which I appreciate. I like that the title has some style to it. And I really like the use of arrows as containers for expectation and reality. I'm also noticing different styled containers for each set of ideas, and I could see that being helpful. Here's another with that similar mind map type approach. Here I think you see a nice combination of smaller icons throughout, as well as one larger scene. I think it's cool how the quotes are in a more italic and stylized font to help them stand out. I also think it's a cool use of DNA strands as separators, which I think is tied to this werewolf-human dynamic going on in the story. In this one, we've got good use of a handful of different colors and pen sizes. You'll also see a nice hierarchy in text size. You've got the title in a big font, the section headers bold but a little bit smaller, and then the rest of the text in normal handwriting. I also think this was a really cool use of a scene to help separate the different sections, with the water and the boat itself helping to break up the surrounding page. And here we've got very clear organization into these 8 different sections. I think it's got a really nice balance and symmetry to it. I love the use of a strong central image as a container for the main title. I think a tranquilizer plays a big role in the story, which is why that was chosen. And that's a nice use of just a bit of color in the background for each different section. And I appreciate the variation within each section. You've got a few scenes, a few standout quotes, a few others with more detailed text description. That makes for a great capturing overall. So, to Miss Freeman's 9th graders, well done. Both those who created the examples that I just shared, as well as anyone who's trying out these techniques that might feel a little bit awkward at first. And I imagine that you might be feeling some resistance toward incorporating drawings into your notes. But I hope that you're finding some specific techniques that do work well for you and help you take notes on books and lectures and videos in a way that you find to be useful, and that over time you can kind of tailor to your own preferences and your own learning style. And thank you to Ms. Freeman for sending that rubric as well as those student examples my way. It was fun to be able to share them. I hope that other teachers and students benefited from taking a look at those. As always, feel free to take any ideas that you liked from this video and start incorporating them into your classroom. If you have other approaches to grading sketchnotes, let us know with a comment below. And if you'd like some support with the sketchnoting instruction that you bring into your classroom, check out my resource kit, Sketchnoting in the Classroom. That contains a bunch of short video lessons meant to be played in your class with follow-up activities that you can tie to whatever content you're teaching that week. I've linked to that down below as well, so go check that out. And good luck as you continue finding ways to share this valuable skill with your students. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again in the next one. Till then.